welcome, Michelle Shimmin. I believe that there's no introduction really needed. Anybody that's watching this webinar will know precisely who you are. But there's a story behind everyone in the industry, and if you watch any of my webinars, you'll feel I call them my wild and wacky questioning, because I find it super interesting to figure out, why did you end up with Shimmin Consulting? What took you from originally what you were saying, what was that, 34 years ago? You were a registered dental assistant. And here you are today, probably one of the number one consulting companies in the orthodontic industry. That's fascinating to me, and I'm pretty sure it is to everybody else. So welcome, and I'd love to hear your story.
Thank you so much. I just really appreciate the opportunity to be here, Lorraine. And as I hope our reputation at Shimmin Consulting is out there, as we're true believers in collaboration and really recognizing not only services and products, but companies that can ultimately support practice efficiency, success, and profitability. So if I were truly to describe what Shimmin Consulting is all about, that's what I would like our reputation to really be. But yeah, great question about how it came about. My background is actually in psychology. I thought I was going to be a counselor.
Very interesting.
It is, but that's always my passion. My passion behind the psychology of influencing how people think and feel about a product or a service or an experience, but also in management and leadership and communication. So as I was working in the industry, the process just made sense to me and came naturally to me. And I always viewed solutions that just came naturally to me. And then I was very good at influence within practices. So it really stimulated a passion for teaching and coaching and inspiring those around me. So that was what I targeted. I had gotten married and started a family. So actually, Chris and I are getting ready to celebrate 27 years of marriage. And
congratulations.
Thank you so much. But I stayed in orthodontics. It was such a fabulous industry. It was an industry that was growing so fast. It stimulated an excitement and an enthusiasm in me that has just grown. And I feel really blessed for the opportunities that I've had, but most importantly for the team that I have alongside me as well. So that's where we started. That's how it came about.
Behind every great woman is another great woman.
Or a lot of them.
Or a lot of them. I get to say that because we're a team of women also. So we're a small company. There's only 8 of us total. So think about the impact that we're making in the industry with really just 8 women that are, and it speaks volumes to what the experience that you had was. You fell into an industry that you really loved, but you also paid attention to what you were really good at, right? So we do the Clifton Strengths Finder. Have you ever done that before?
I haven't, but I'm definitely familiar with it.
Yes, we do that inside the company because especially for a startup company, it gives me an idea of sort of what seat on the bus should I put this person, right? And not only that, but whenever you tap into something that is a natural strength and you put somebody in the seat to use them, and you've met my team before, they just soar, right? And they have amazing experiences, and getting them to get up and work every day is just not something that I need to deal with. I have to tell them to stop working, right? So you are the product of finding something that you love, loving the industry, tapping into your strengths, and really soaring from there. And so when was the consulting company came into play? Then do you remember what year that was?
Yeah, so that was in 2011. We're coming up onto 12 years now. So yeah, it's been a fabulous ride.
You've come a long way, right?
Thank you. Well, and I'm very proud of the fact that we have clients all over the world. We have had boots on the ground and eyes into so many different scenarios that we can recognize and understand what works really, really well, and the areas of struggle and challenge that don't.
Have you found Have you found that because that's what I did for the larger part of my orthodontic career was I traveled around the world, and I'm curious to the practices that you would visit outside of the United States. Is it a different mindset? Is it the same mindset? Do they really have just the same set of problems, and perhaps there's just a tweak into that particular country? What was be your experience with that?
Typically, the answer to all of those questions is yes.
Mhm.
It's all very, very similar areas of struggle. We look at those as areas of opportunities. The process of serving our patients is the same globally.
Mhm.
Obviously, in different parts of the world, we're on a different scale of where we are in orthodontic business growth.
Mhm.
The US and Canada, so North America, does set a standard of care globally. And I definitely see in other parts of the country where that margin is definitely narrowing. Technology is allowing for that much faster than what we saw 15 years ago. So there is a very clear understanding in our industry on a shift of expectations from our patients, going from more of a practice-centric approach to our treatment modalities and our solutions to serve our patients to definitely more of a patient-centric approach.
Mhm.
And this is where I get really excited about Retainers for Life, because I
Mhm.
don't think that you could represent that patient-centric approach clearer than truly recognizing the value of your patient's time,
Mhm.
recognizing the importance. You know, Lorraine, I will share with you and be vulnerable. I've had braces 3 times because I didn't wear my retainers. I do wear my retainers now, but it is not an atypical story. And
Yes.
I, out of even my own personal experience, recognize that convenience is a major factor in replacing a lost or a broken retainer or a
Right.
misplaced, And so again, when we can recognize what our values are and our mission in serving our patients, is this about a patient-centric approach? And how can you take a solution that is very patient-oriented and make it profitable and efficient for the practice? So
Yes.
those are the puzzles that I
Mhm.
challenge myself, and I really pride myself in creating the strategies and the solutions for practices that can deliver that profitability, that efficiency, and most importantly, that patient-centric solution.
Mhm. So when Dr. Jackson, the founder of Retainers for Life, reached out to me and had told me about her idea, there was a couple of reasons why I said yes. And number one was that it is, although we deliver directly to the mailbox, we're not a direct to consumer company.
Precise.
But we did have to pay attention to looking to see what our number one customer wanted. And we know here at Retainers for Life, and I think that this is a great um, process to do for even for practices to say who is our number one customer. Is it the busy mom? Is it the busy dad? Is it the busy parents? And then think about what that avatar is. What does that number one customer's life look like? What does it sound like? What is the day? What are the challenges? What are the things that work really great for that customer? And then building your product, whether it's a practice or a Retainers for Life program, around that world. And so I think that's what's made us so successful is we've been able to take what the needs of the number one customer is, which is busy moms out there, give them what they need, want, desire, and require from a company, but put it very squarely in the hands of the orthodontic community. And make it a powerful tool that they can market with, that they can create revenue with. And I think that that goes even into the world of what you do. You talk about it being patient centric, paying attention to what their needs and wants are, and making your practice stand out in the sea of practices, right? You walk down Main Street. How is yours different? I've heard you lecture about that before.
A
And
differentiator, finding a way in a very competitive industry. How can you identify a differentiator for your practice? And I'm going to touch back on that direct to consumer solution. There's a reason that exploded so huge. Now, we don't need to go into the success of it and the failures of it and so forth, but that patients are seeking that type of convenient solution. And if, as expert providers, we're not providing that, they will seek it somewhere else. As you said, Retainers for Life is not a direct to consumer solution as much as understanding the convenience of how we can provide a specialist solution conveniently to them, with understanding the convenience of lifestyle. Now, I have done all of my holiday shopping virtually. I have not had to go into a store. It's all convenience at our fingertips. So how can we really combine what the landscape of healthcare solutions is doing to meet the needs of our patients and our consumers and maintain that specialist driven solution? That's really is that gold recipe. And that's where we find the success in practices. There is a tremendous evolving landscape in patient expectations in orthodontics right now. And our patient expectations are not going to go backwards at all. And so practices that can recognize how those solutions can fit into their business model, into their values and mission statement, and maximize what those solutions are, truly find that recipe of success. And that's what is something that gets us really, really excited. You mentioned the busy moms and dads, and Dr. Jackson, this is what really resonated with me about her as the founder for Retainers for Life. Not only is she a busy mom, she's an extremely business practice owner. So she's coming from both of those angles and understanding the value point. She's not an outsider telling a doctor what a solution should be in their practice, but out of personal experience in her own practice, she understands a solution that meets the needs of her patients. And I find in so many practices that we're in, yes, it's easy to quantify and talk, Lorraine, about the busy parent or mom or what have you, but look at the professionals out there, even those that don't have kids, that are busy. And it's a challenge to take time out to go into an in-person appointment. So I feel that when we can recognize, we call those our patient profiles, as you mentioned earlier, really understand who and what patients you're looking to provide a solution for, you're able to fully customize that solution. And I mean, you guys at Retainers for Life allow so much customization in the solutions, even in your tiered pricing. I really respect you're not just coming at it from a very high-end demographics, but you're looking for solutions even in the lower income areas that give complete control to the practice in how to meet the needs of their patients.
You're 100% right. It would have made my life a whole lot easier if we said, this is the product and that's it, right? Because how easy is that to build, right? You hit the nail on the head. That's the product, multiply it by 10,000 and we're a profitable company. And it didn't take long for me to figure out that was, just a dream that we could easily do that, because orthodontists, and, it's one of the things that I pride myself in. And if we look at what my strengths are, I have this uncanny ability to listen, and I'm always listening. So when we had someone in Nebraska that said to me, I really love what you're doing. I'd really like to offer this, but my demographic can't afford that. And then we had the guy in perhaps Beverly Hills that said, the revenue that I would make from this, I really don't make enough with your product. You don't move the needle for me. And then I suddenly realized, each doctor is his own company. And I have to think of that part of our company again, from the avatar's perspective, right? Who is my number one customer? We have two customers. We have customers where patients use retainers, but we also have doctors that use retainers for life inside their practice. So once I put on my listening ears, I quickly realized that we needed to allow retainers for life to be a solution inside the practice, not a product, a solution. And that was what you had mentioned, Dr. Jackson, that she understood what the patient was needing, but she also knew the cumbersome nature of retention inside her practice. And
And
so
the
we were
opportunities. Yeah, the opportunities
absolutely,
available. So
so
absolutely. I'd love to talk more about what we see as well in
yes,
opportunities with practices, because where I feel the practices miss the mark in fully capitalizing on what Retainers for Life can provide them with that revenue generating stream. Where I find a disconnect is when they look at it as a simple product to offer to patients.
yes.
So what we endorse and what we highly encourage is, as you said, start with that step one in understanding the avatar, create that avatar, that patient profile, and really understand what type of a solution you're looking for. And then once you commit to that solution, then understand what that pathway or the patient pathway is, and really go all in with that process. It will not be as successful if we're simply offering something to our patients. When we can fully adopt it into our internal practice systems,
Yes.
then we can make adjustments to all of those workflows. And that makes it easier for all the team members, makes it much more successful for every team member. And the practice will ultimately see the benefit that that solution will bring, because the team member can own the education behind what Retainers for Life is, how their internal process is to serve the patients. And as I train a lot on psychological sales within a practice, it's imperative that we can inspire a passion within each team member
Yes.
for what that solution is. Because when we're passionate about something, it's not high pressure sales. And however your team members think and feel about a service or a product is the message they will exude to your patients. So I love that you talk about the avatar. Like I said, we talk about that patient profile and recognize how this service can be very patient centric, meet the needs of our busy families and our busy patients, and value what that retention is. You know, how great is it for a patient to call up and not have to come back into the office? They can do that the day of or the next day. They're not waiting a couple of weeks on end to, oh gosh, I got to schedule and make an appointment and come back in.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And just to sort of, backtrack a little bit to the team members, because again, because Dr. Jackson has sort of lived and breathed in that world, she understood the cumbersome nature, or maybe not cumbersome nature, but perhaps the pushback that you could possibly get from implementing a program similar to this, right? It's not just us, not just Retainers for Life. You get pushbacks on many new things that you want to do inside the practice, right? This is not something new just for our product. And what I really was very excited to hear was she had already thought that through. So the idea of bonusing the clinical staff to present the product was brilliant. But what ultimately happens, and so this is the experience that we have, is we get that little pushback where they go, well, okay. But the moment that the mom goes, whoa, yeah, sign me up for that, then the staff start to understand that you're giving the patient something that they need, want, and desire. And in fact, even just from an educational perspective, as you said, this is not a product that you're selling. It's not a nickel and dime. It's not an afterthought. There is a process that we need to take our patients through to help them understand that retention is going to be a part of their life. And there's ways to do that. And there's ways to outsource that education to companies like ours to make sure that by the time the patient has reached their debond appointment, that they understand and perhaps they don't relapse. I think we can never take human nature out of relapse. We get that question a lot. So do you see less relapse? And as I said, we can provide affordable replacement retainers for the rest of their lives, but human nature is sometimes you stop doing things. And Michelle, you
I'm
admit 3, and I unfortunately I have to admit to 3 as well.
Did you really?
So it's so funny that I ended up in this job, right? Because I got to understand also the process that your brain goes through, what you tell yourself whenever your teeth are moving. And you're like, I'm going to get to that. I can't find my retainer, and before you know it, 6 months has passed, right? So
Exactly.
there's a whole world there that can be explored by a company like ours as well. More to come, right? Other than just retention.
Well, and to revisit back with what Dr. Jackson's vision was in her personal experience within her own business
Mhm,
of orthodontics, recognizing that pushback and that challenge among team members. I
mhm.
say all the time, the most expensive words in business are that we've always done it that way. So
Yes.
hopefully we can inspire a mindset of growth and improvement within all of our team members. That's with your leadership and your management techniques internally.
Mhm.
However, I also see with Dr. Jackson's business model in recognizing and appreciating the team members. You know, when I work with practices, creating the setup internally for them, I really promote this as an appreciation and a recognition for team members as educators and influencers to your patients.
Mhm.
Not even necessarily, if you promote this, we'll give you this, right? I mean, I really like to help team members see the why behind anything that we recommend and we do.
Mhm.
And when we're able to do that successfully, that it meets the patient needs, it meets your practice values and your mission statements, it makes your job as easy and efficient as possible.
Mhm.
When we can help them see that why behind it and buy into this process, and then recognize and thank them. I think that in and of itself is really, really powerful. I've
Yeah.
seen where it becomes a really fun internal competition within practices.
Yes.
I've also with practices that provide this as the retention solution. It's just an opportunity to
Yeah.
recognize the team members and thank them for their impact as educators and influencers to our patients.
Absolutely. They're a strong part of what we do. And in fact, again, even if you think about the clinical staffs, I always think about them as our boots on the ground, almost like an extension of my team, right? They're the boots on the ground. They're the people going, dear patient, got to tell you about this. It's really interesting, right? So essentially, they're my boots on the ground. So the idea that we make sure that the clinical staff feel that they're being compensated and fairly for the time and effort that they put into it. We thought backwards from their perspective as well. And so one of the things that we do is we have an instantaneous chat that sits on their computer or their phone or however they want to do, and they literally can ask. So, oh, the patient wants to know if you can do A, B, and C.
Wow.
And our
Wow.
rule, the protocol inside our company is an answer in 2 minutes. So we
Wow.
we have our team monitors every single one of our practices. So anytime there's a question, there's a 2-minute answer because the clinical staff's time is valuable. And if we didn't think backwards from that perspective, again, retainers for life would have become quite cumbersome inside a practice. And I mean, we all know what it's like when you call customer service, kind of like pulling your teeth out, right? It's like, it's so incredibly frustrating. You'd rather have a root canal than deal with Verizon or your phone company.
Yeah.
And I know that if I'm busy, the idea that I can chat with someone in a very, like, you don't have to look at me and I don't have to see me, and I literally just send you a text message. So we have teams for
Wow.
every practice that comes on board because their time is so valuable. I think more companies should do that, be perfectly honest with you. I
Well, that
challenge other
again,
companies to do it.
that is again, I mean, change that to consumer centric. That's recognizing the value. And so, I mean, Lorraine, this is demonstrative of what every industry is doing and
Yes.
how we are training people.
Mhm.
We have to recognize that just because patients come into the orthodontic office does not change their expectation and communication,
Mhm.
convenience, thoroughness, and the greatest solution to their problem. So, you know, cumbersome is a perfect word. Whenever a practice adopts a new service or a new process or system, that's exactly, it feels cumbersome. It feels awkward. It's
Yes.
actually, I use the word painful. It's
Mhm.
expensive. It's painful to the practice. And
Mhm.
this is where I say all the time, when you dabble in a space, that's more painful and expensive to the practice. It's really the most expensive place to live. So when you can circle back to your why and how you're committed to serving your patients and choose solutions and processes that serve that and meet the patient needs that way and go all in, this is where you find the greatest level of ease, convenience, profitability, and success. Truly. So
And there's never been, I mean, you and I have been in the orthodontic industry for a long time. So even if someone had to pitch this idea to me of retainers for life 15 years ago, whew, would have been hard, right? So I know that you lecture on digital workflow, and so tell me more about that world. I have to say I get very sort of focused here. Oh, and I'm only looking at this part of the industry, but I know there's an explosion of technology, and you are just sort of on the forefront of that. Like you know these companies and you know what they're doing. So tell me more about that.
well, when we talk about it, and that really is a buzz phrase in our industry, the digital workflow,
Yeah.
digital business model, digital solutions. But when we really dial into what those words mean,
Mhm.
what that means is using technology to provide efficient solutions.
Mm.
And so really taking essentially our solutions, from brick and mortar and analog to digital. And
Mhm.
so now, with most practices having a scanner in their practice,
Mhm.
why wouldn't you provide retainers for life? We're off of a scan that you're already taking. You don't have to have internal processes where you're paying a team member, you're carving out time, you need the space in the lab, you need the equipment in your lab to be able to provide those retainers, and then you need your patient to come back. Now,
Yep.
there are some practices that have a truly dialed in digital lab, and
Yep.
they're fabulous, and they have clear workflows, and they do it very, very well.
Mhm.
Most practices see that it's enticing, they see the
Yes.
benefit of it, but they don't have that connection made yet.
Mhm.
And why not outsource and let a company be able to do that for you, minimize that internal work and expense, and simply collect a check,
Yeah.
serve your patients conveniently and collect a check. You know,
Yes.
um, I remember back in the day, the biggest space for your practice was enticing. That's what people sought. Um, I know of practices that had movie theaters in their orthodontic practice, and gone are those days. We are
Yes.
looking for space that's efficient, that's comfortable to serve our patients, that's affordable, and not to actually have to have that massive space with a movie theater,
Mhm.
available to your patients, because your patients also recognize, what that
Yeah.
represents, and they want to be served conveniently, efficiently. They want to be recognized, the value of their time, and
Yes.
that service and care is what sets you apart. It differentiates your practice, and it turns your patients into your walking, talking referrals. So to be successful at that process, you have to understand the patient's journey throughout your practice. Most importantly, every team member in your practice has to understand that journey or workflow.
Mhm.
So when we reference that digital workflow, that's the digital scan, that's providing a digital treatment plan, a digital solution with the whole pathway or the whole journey.
Mhm.
And how can we then deliver that conveniently to the patient? That is where we spend a lot of time providing solutions to practices. And it isn't simply setting up a digital lab. It's not simply creating a digital manager, but it is a true workflow. It's a true patient journey of consistent educators that interact with your patients that are
Mhm.
on your team. So that's what we spend a lot of time doing within practices, because when you can dial that in well, again, that's where you get the efficiency. Because if you don't dial it in well, if you don't understand that journey and that pathway or that workflow,
Mhm.
you are introducing a lot of pain points, a lot of hiccups that represent and translate expense to the practice.
Mhm. That's very interesting because one of the things when we bring a doctor on board, we've spent now like a number of years doing this, and as I said, I have this just this natural tendency to just be listening a lot. And so what I did was I actually circled back and said, what is the avatar of our number one practices, right? Because you have practices that come on board that are converting at like 90%, right? The efficiencies of it is outstanding. And then sometimes we have practices that come on board that really struggle, and we have systems in place, of course, to help them and train them and get them up to speed. But what is the avatar of that practice, right? And the avatar, the number one, if you sit just what stands at the very top of that list is a doctor that is committed, right? So, we've had many a doctor say, I'm not going to come to the training. I have ladies, my ladies will come to the training and they'll get up to speed on that, which is perfectly fine. But we find that because that person or that doctor is not fully committed to it, even right down to showing up for the training and understanding the nuances of it, right? Being able to answer that question that perhaps one of the team members forgot. That is the number one most successful practice for us. Who knew, right? Getting
Well,
the
I think that doesn't surprise me, Lorraine.
yes,
That does not surprise me because
yes,
this is where I referenced early on management and leadership processes. It
yes.
starts with the doctor and the practice owner. It absolutely is imperative that it trickles down throughout the practice. And I mean, I would highly advise and expand on that all team members should be a part of it, because every single point of interaction with your patient is an opportunity to educate and influence. The first point of contact on the phone, the first time they walk into your office, chair side. And we find, to expand on what your patient profile or a practice profile or avatar that you just talked about, we also find that chairside technicians are typically very underutilized as educators. And the practices
That's
that
interesting.
truly are elevated in their success for solutions in the practice are using their chairside technicians as educators, and they truly have the ability to influence the patient's compliance and success in these solutions that we have available to deliver that very patient-centered practice.
Mhm. It's very interesting to me, as I said on the corporate side all of these years. And a lot of what we learn on the corporate side, sort of the building of companies and management and leadership, is just part of the corporate side. And what I came to realize, and I would love to see this change because it would take these practices and these doctors to loftier heights faster, right? Which is more education inside the schools that talk about running your own company, right? What are management and leadership skills? Unfortunately, that many of these orthodontists come out into this world of needing to purchase a practice and run a practice without some of the necessary skills, not because but because it was never put in front of
Most
them before. So this is a key role that you as a consulting company plays in the industry. It's very, very important to the success of our industry and the growth also.
orthodontists come out with very, very little business training or understanding. They'll talk to friends, they'll do their own research in that space as well. No need to reinvent the wheel, and to
Right.
recognize that, that's also a very small view of successful systems and processes. So it definitely is of benefit to the practices to recognize, bring alongside experts that have worked with hundreds of orthodontic practices in so many different scenarios. Absolutely. So yeah, this is where our passion is. This is where we live every day, all day. I do have the privilege of lecturing for the colleges and the residency programs, but it's a very, very small time frame that is spent on that business side of orthodontics. They're specialists in that area, and we want to provide them the opportunities to be that specialist and to really support their business in the other areas as well and protect their business.
Yeah, absolutely. Where do you think the industry is going? So if I was to challenge you to say, what is the orthodontic industry going to look like? We'll go 10 to 15 years from now. This is your challenge. That's just, we should dream just a little, right? Because 10 to 15 years from now, you and I are going to jump on our next webinar and be like, ooh, look how right we were.
Where we came from. In the last 5 years, to visualize how technology has changed our treatment solutions, I oftentimes feel like, gosh, I got to hang on tight because this train is moving pretty fast.
Yeah.
So in all transparency, Lorraine, I can't even fathom what 10 or 15 years from now is going to look like. I often think even just 5 years down the road. And with what is changing so fast with AI
Yes.
and with our digital treatment solutions available to us, if your practice doesn't recognize the value in those digital solutions, you will not be on the upper cusp of change. You will, miss that wave of change and what it can provide the business and the practice. It is simply going to be patients in your practice for the least amount of time, actual feet in your practice for the least amount of time. It's going to be an increased amount of consistent communication. Our society is immediate in the moment, and that's what our patients are expecting with that communication. And, that aligns with our solutions that we provide to them. So there is absolutely no doubt in my mind that practices have to get on board and recognize and be able to dial in profitability with this, because we do know that digital solutions increase the expenses to the practice. It's different than what just simply an analog bracket solution is when we're talking overhead expense. But what I challenge practices, and I'm getting ready to be on a panel after the first of the year, talking about the highest priorities to practices that they need to focus on in 2024. And what that is needs to understand the workflow and the patient journey in the digital solutions, and to tap into every team member as educators in that process. Otherwise, all you're going to do in adopting and bringing in those solutions is cause more work for your team members. And cause more pain and disruption.
Yes.
And that's where it doesn't work. That's where it's hard. So it is truly about understanding the value to the value of every time a patient of yours steps foot in your practice. Do you know what that value is? Practices, it's imperative. That absolutely needs to be an industry standard metric that is looked at every time, because that should also translate to the amount of time and hours that the doctor needs to have feet in the practice and needs to be serving the patients. There is a dollar value around that. So that's what I recognize and forecast as being the direction of our industry in the next 5 years. Truly understanding those values and providing the solutions that are going to provide the greatest value point to that. The greatest dollar value to the doctor's hourly time, the greatest dollar value to every time a patient steps foot into our practice, dialed down to even minutes, Lorraine.
Yes. I think it's amazing. I love that you're pinpointing this is a lot to absorb, but there is really important, there's a starting point for them all, right? To say in 2024, here's where you should be really paying attention. Do you remember, and I don't know if this has been happening to you, but the malls in this area, I'm in Pennsylvania, a lot of the malls are morphing. Well, some of them went out of business, as you know, right? It's like the dying mall, right? And then some of the malls are morphing, and they're building housing, and they're becoming sort of more sort of like essentially like a village, right? It's where you just stroll around. There's no villages in the United States, right? I mean, I'm from Ireland, so when I came here, it was like, there's just strip malls. There's no little villages where you just sort of get out of your car and you have everything at your fingertips. And essentially that's what the mall is becoming. And I think again, that's paying attention to what consumers' needs, wants, and desires are. And as and what us as consumers are also making demands, right? And so as if we don't jump on the bandwagon and really pay attention to what our consumers' wants are, we will get left behind.
100%. I'm going to actually dial that statement in because I don't feel like that could be a stronger statement. You hit the nail on the head. And what it is what people's experiences are. So yes, we are building where I'm out in the Pacific Northwest. They're even in the weather that we get, they are building a lot of shopping space and experiences, from wine rooms to salons to anything and everything in these
Yes.
communities or villages, if you will, with
Yes.
living above. And what it is dialed down to what people are looking for with a daily experience in
Yes.
everything they interact with, and convenience. It's right there at their fingertips, from where they are going to get all of their personal services to their shopping.
Yes.
Amazon has this dialed in down to walking. We have stores in the Seattle area that you walk into, you pick things up off the shelf and you walk out. You don't even check out. It just
it's amazing. Yeah.
on your Amazon card, and they are understanding the consumer profile that they want to serve.
Mm-hmm.
So this all around the experience and the convenience of everything at your fingertips, easily, thoroughly, and the greatest solution to their orthodontic problem is what practices have to focus on in understanding. And as those digital solutions, with Retainers for Life, it's a digital solution. It's not what, something that I love as a business advisor and analyst, is that it's not an expense that the practice has to pay for, but they're getting a check for it.
Right.
I have doctors saying, where do I categorize this check that just showed up? Right?
What a terrible problem to have, right?
But so it is, it's a digital solution. It doesn't have the overhead cost that the practice has to pay out on, but digital solutions can increase the overhead if we don't recognize what the dollar value of the doctor's time, the patient time in the practices, staffing solutions, all of those need to be tied in with that. And to recognize, opportunities that can be revenue generating channels for the practice that fit into that experience, that convenience, and that patient-centric approach to what your patients are looking for, all while simply receiving a check for it.
Yes.
And supporting the practice needing, not needing that space and those, the extra staff and the extra time and the extra, equipment.
Yes, absolutely.
I think
it's going to be pretty exciting. And even if we just look at, our lives beyond the orthodontic industry and the changes that we're experiencing and what we're just embracing and what we're not embracing, right? Speaks volumes to the exciting changes that are going to come in 2024 and beyond. I'm excited about it. I'm a little on the older side, so I'm not going to be around. I have 10 more years to do this. Let's get some exciting new products out there and new ways to be able to do business in this industry, because I want to be here to experience it all. But thank you, Michelle. You are just a godsend, because I think that like you're inside my head and I'm inside your head. We have very much got a lot of synergy happening there. And I appreciate you so much coming and sharing it with us. Thanks again.
Well, thank you for the opportunity, Lorraine. And again, I couldn't be more grateful for the team at Retainers for Life and what Dr. Jackson's vision was for practice solutions, and how you support my team and I when we're in practices, ultimately, like you stated, to support the practice and their team members as well. So I highly recommend when we're working for practices and looking for those additional revenue opportunities, I highly recommend practices seeking out a solution like Retainers for Life. And I can highly endorse that they will not be sorry that they pursued that. So thank you for the opportunity, Lorraine, and the team with you as well. You're fabulous. And I look forward to 2024 with you as well.
Thank you, Michelle. Take care.